Hello folks, the Y Guy here again. Welcome to my home on this very beautiful spring day. And you may be thinking, spring day, look at that snow over your shoulder. You know, that thing used to be 7 to 8 feet deep. So now it's between 3 and 4. So we're doing good. We're doing good. The name of this video is called The Y Guy Explains the False Difference Between the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament. You know, there really is no difference, and I'm going to prove it. I went to a customer's home yesterday to repair her leather sofa. And, you know, I don't bring things up because that's their sanctuary. A person's home is their sanctuary. However, she brought it up. She brought this whole thing up. And I do believe in divine appointments, though, however. And I also believe that we must have an answer for that hope that lies within us. I really believe that with all my heart. But God will set it all up if it's necessary, okay? And she just couldn't understand how the God of the Old Testament is almost to her as if there was two different gods we're talking about, you see? And a lot of Christians think that. Well, I'm going to explain that in this video, and because I've actually heard people say that God's bone-crushing wrath, you know, is part of his love somehow, and is for avenging the victims and the innocent, okay? You know, but my conscience and putting on the mind of Christ compels me to ask if this is true, you know. In the great love chapter of 1 Corinthians 13, you know, we're given a definition as well as an actual functional, practical parameters of love and how it operates, right? And the closest that it comes to any form of God's displeasure whatsoever is when it says, love rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. That's the closest the whole thing comes to. You know, this is hardly, that statement is hardly a manifesto which supports a famine-bringing, plague-sending, fire-flinging, let's see what else, bone-crushing, child-killing, throat-slitting killer that the Old Testament often portrays God to be. You see? Something's wrong here, folks, and I'm going to explain what it is. And in Jeremiah 23:36, speaking to the scribes, the ones who actually wrote scripture that was later put into our Bibles, it says, "For you have perverted the words of the living God." Okay? Because there's two reasons. There's two answers to this conundrum we have here of this bone-crushing, you know, character that we claim as God. Well, God's character has been perverted, okay? And also in Jeremiah 8:8 it says, "How can you say we are wise and the law of the Lord is with us? But behold, the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie." They literally lied about God. And how did they do that? I'm glad you asked. You know, it was part of the military culture back then because they were very barbaric people. All peoples were at that point in time. And the Israelis were no different. A commander would get a hare in his rear to go invade a particular city or a town or whatever, and they would go in and they would slaughter every man, woman, and child on occasion, you know, and take what they wanted, plundered, and what have you, like most barbarians do. And then later the scribes would write down that God sanctioned it and God authorized it if they were successful. But of course, if they weren't successful and they lost the battle of that city and stuff, then God was angry with them. That's just how the pagan mindset worked, okay? And you know what? The Christians are doing the exact same thing today. You know, in 2019, they're doing the same thing. Sure, we're not going out and slitting people's throats. Well, in a way, I guess we are when you hear about a Christian who murders an abortion doctor. You know, I've heard that on the news. And then you have other religions that in the name of Allah or whatever name of their God, they're going out and burning people alive and cutting their heads off and drowning them and, you know, all sorts of things. That's what religion does, doesn't it? Lovely. Well, anyway, Christendom is also, they're doing far worse than all of this stuff. By far, and I'm going to explain what that far worse is at the very end of this video. Now, I'm going to prove that it's all a lie. All these things that Jeremiah 8:8 says, "Behold, the lying pen of the scribes made into a lie." I'm going to prove it's a lie because John 4:8 as well as John 4:16 says clearly that God is love. And love doesn't do all those things. It doesn't. If anything, we're told to love our enemies, and yet God sanctions the Israelis to go out and do all that kind of crap to their enemies? Really? Come on. We got to use the brain God gave us too. We just can't go with blind faith. 1 Corinthians 13 doesn't say that love crushes evildoers, but instead it reforms them. That's what love does. And also in 1 Corinthians, it doesn't say that love tortures non-believers for an eternity, but it converts them instead. Oh, but what if they are not converted and they die? Well, find me a verse that says that death somehow stops God. I can prove one in 2 Peter where the gospel's even preached to the dead, but that's for another video. 1 Corinthians doesn't say that love incinerates people. And there's that segment of Christianity that thinks that because they just can't get their mind wrapped around an eternal torture chamber, that God somehow incinerates them and just blinks them out of existence. And then there's the most common segment that somehow love, doesn't produce never-ending pain for those who reject it. It heals them instead. Well, folks, that's what the lake of fire is all for. It's a process to purify, to rid people of those things that cause them to reject God's love. It's as simple as that. Okay? You can have the best of both worlds here. God still is just, and he's still holy and pure, and because he gets his way by eliminating things that cause us not to be all of those things. Okay? I mean, God's got it handled. He really does. There's a lot of hope here. Remember that hope that lies within us? We need to have an answer. That's the answer. However, 1 Corinthians does say that love believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, and that love never fails. And if God is love, you can say God never fails. And Christian, hell is a failure. It is. Okay? So in conclusion of this video, when you read verses that imply God's anger, okay? Now, since God is love, is there even the slightest chance that these verses are just simply saying, while saying that God is quenched and that he's grieved and he's anguished at the sin, that very sin that poisons us? That's what love is. To be angry at what harms us, that poisons us, and it keeps and it ruins the perspective that we have of him, and it keeps us from knowing him. Does that make sense? Because his love will ultimately prevail because it simply can't fail. We're talking about God here. His love, he can't fail because it never retreats. It doesn't matter if it's in this lifetime or in any other lifetime, and or a post-mortem age to come. His love will never retreat. So, so much for justice, huh? Or at least a perverted view of justice. And I wrote about that, and I'm going to share that in a moment. Justice, vengeance, and wrath that Christendom promotes by basically claiming that God will never, ever, for all eternity, God will never be satisfied with justice. And his vengeance will never be satisfied. And his wrath will just endure forever. You don't think so? Why? Because it's supposedly going on forever in hell. Think about it. Think. Now, if you disagree with this video, give me a thumbs down, and if you're going to leave a comment about it, be polite about it, so I don't have to delete your comment. Also, leave a positive comment and a thumbs up if you so choose to. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Look me up on Facebook under a group called the Why Guy Group. It's a private group. I ask 3 questions for you to join. And look me up on a public timeline under the avatar name of John Anthony Jones. And in closing, I'm going to leave a link to my book that I published on Amazon. It's 464 pages, large print. It's entitled, I don't know, I can't see the video lens here. It's titled In Defense of God's Love, and it covers a lot of what I've shared here. In the back of the book, the synopsis simply says Christianity's humble beginning was simply about exposing God's love for mankind, and in response, mankind would return that love by loving one another. Christianity has now morphed into a world-class religion with its members diversely divided about every imaginable topic. The author explores a few of those major key divisions and offers his unique editorial flavor to the mix by asking the reader, why do you believe what you believe, and where did that belief originate? Okay, thank you for viewing.